Just remember to speak up there.
Okay, if you're online, can you hear us? And if you can't, turn on it. Bethany.
He said yes.
Jim says
Yay!
Yeah.
Yes, he's for
You today.
Who is in this
I don't know
office right
your
now
name.
that's
What's your
online?
name?
My name's Pam Oberson.
Pam, nice to meet you. I'm Jen.
Oh, just.
Okay, I'm the general manager of our offices, so if we haven't met, that's who I am. If you guys want to introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. John Ladebor, I'm the team leader at our Edina Market Center.
Carmen Malden, I am the team leader in Elk River.
And Holly Red, I'm the team leader in Minneapolis Lakes.
Hey, so we went to family reunion. Did any of you guys go?
Next year, we're going.
Next year.
That's a
I love it.
That's
Raise your head.
Oh, you should
Um,
be.
I was in San Diego though, so kind of with my mom.
You were in that area.
You're a different kind of family reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things they do is called the CEO Summit. They do that the day before a family reunion officially kicks off. And it is, I actually don't know who, it's not for everybody. It's for team leaders and for rainmakers of teams, correct?
Also, I think maps people, like if you have a
Maps, yeah.
maps coach, you get.
And it's all leadership. I
Yeah,
think.
so all leadership is the idea. Which is great. It's an add-on basically to family reunion, but a lot of this stuff to me was like there were so many great applicable ideas for our businesses that not everybody had access to from family reunion. So we're gonna do our best to give that all to you. There's a lot in here that I'm gonna apply right away that I've been processing that is really powerful. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about CEO Summit is that it doesn't directly have to do with real estate. It's not teaching you exactly how to sell more real estate or whatever it is, but it's got people that are doing really cool things in different areas, and it's how can we take that and then draw
Apply it.
the bridge into a real estate business.
Yeah. So Gary kicked it off and if we have time, I'm gonna go back and share what Gary shared, like remember his handwritten notes that morning, just on
Yeah.
his kind of like life principles. But I want to start by talking about, so they had on five guests, like 5 professionals, and each of them had a specialty, and we're just gonna take them one at a time and kind of go through what that person shared on. So Rory Vaden was the first one. He's the owner of Brand Builders. And he started out 5 or 6 years ago with Lewis Howes. Do any of you know who Lewis Howes is? He's kind of a personal, like a self-help, personal growth and development, has authored best-selling books, he speaks, he has a podcast, and School of Greatness is one of his things. And so he came to Rory like, help, I'm doing all of these things, but I feel like I'm not cutting through the noise and I'm not able to kind of get to the next level. I've plateaued. And Rory at the time didn't have the company. Rory just was able to sit down and help him figure out like how Lewis was wired and how to really hone in on what was the exact problem that Rory was solving and how to solve for that. So out of that, Lewis was like, Rory, you got to do this. You got to start a business. This is just 5 years ago, Rory started this business, and now he's helped Ed Milet, Lewis Howes, Amy Porterfield, Eric Thompson. So a lot of huge like personality brands, Rory's helped maximize who they are basically. So that's a setup. Is that like a fair setup to him?
Yeah, and I think his statement was he's a strategist. He's not a branding person,
Yeah.
but a strategist on how to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So let's just dive into like any of the notes that you guys have on what stood out to you about some of the things that he shared.
One of the things that I think was really impactful is he really talked about with branding, getting it really clear, which we talk about all the time, but he had it down to one word. What's the one word that you want to be known for, right? And when you have to only pick one word, it becomes really important, but you're also super clear. And as he walked through why people break through that wall, it became just obvious they knew what problem they were solving. So they were able to clearly identify to everyone what they were there to do. When you have 10 things you're doing, you're not really doing anything. So making sure you have that clarity.
So let's like break that down a little bit more. Can you guys explain or fill out like how do you get to the one word?
Yeah, I think it starts with, and this is something ironically enough, with maybe a maps coach. um, we started building out our like the values. What are the things that you value in your business? And I think our natural tendency, one of the things that I wrote down, the note that I took, is stop focusing on the millions of people, start with the one, right? And I think that's pretty counterintuitive to our mind. Like, we just want to cast the widest net possible and talk to everybody. And we're afraid of just really buckling down and talking to one person or one subset or one demographic or whatever it may be, because we think we might be leaving stuff on the table. But I think when you get very clear on who you are, what your values are, and you speak to that, then your people will come, right, at a much higher volume than just trying to spread a super wide message to touch everybody, but not really get past barrier one with them. That makes sense?
You said you're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were.
That one hit.
Like when it comes to real estate, who was I once? Like, my story is different than your story I mean, you guys know some of my story. My story goes back. There was a point when I lost during the downturn. I was bankrupt, short sailed on my house, and was like, oh, and then single woman, bought a house. Like, who was I once, and how am I best positioned if I was selling real estate again to serve that person? So you guys can all take your own lens to the same thing. And he said that too. He said, it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. Like, who are you and how can you reach that person? And what problem are you solving for? So the one word he said, if you think of Lewis Howes, self-doubt is the problem he's solving for. If you think of Brene Brown, shame is the problem she's solving for. So like in real estate, maybe lack of information is the problem you're solving for. Maybe lack of confidence, or self-doubt is the problem you're solving for. So I think it's getting really specific on that.
Yeah, and I think that where it becomes difficult is where we have the tendency to just, hey, what's one word that I can cover so many things with? And that's where we kind of get stuck. It's like, well, I'm a realtor, so what's my word? Homeownership. No, that's not it.
Yeah.
That's not where we're going. I think an unlock for me in thinking about that, because that's where my mind went first. I'm like, what would it be for a realtor? What's the one word that could be applicable? But this isn't like a word you're posting on your sign, right? It's on who you're talking to, and so you can cultivate your message, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was my take on it.
Well,
What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, and to that point, like, touched on a little bit, don't differentiate yourself on what you do, but rather on who you are. So we're all realtors, we're all in the same industry. Things. So we're all solving a similar problem, right? But we have to differentiate by who we are. The question I get asked that the biggest thing for me was, what do people, when people think of you, what do they think of, right? So you're thought of by other people, what's the thing that they think of? And for me, it was kind of twofold. I coach high school basketball and baseball, so that's like a big part of my life. Being a realtor is and has been a big part of my life, and now being in leadership is a big part of that. So that has to apply in different ways, but I'll be congruent, authentic to who I am. So really, you can take that a lot of different ways. Like, who do people in your relationships, what do they think of when they think of you? How do we go and put that out for the world?
That question that John quoted was his definition of what a brand is, which I found
Yeah.
really interesting. When I think of brand, I don't make it that simple. I make it this big, all-inclusive thing. When he said that, I was like, oh, it's really that easy. Of what do people think of when they think of you? That actually is your brand.
That it's the digitization of reputation. Your personal brand is the digitization of your reputation. One thing that he talked about too, when you get really clear on what it is that you solve for, sorry, Carmen,
You're fine.
Sheehan's Wall. Why did he call it that again? I can't remember. Sheehan
Oh.
is the name of somebody on his team. And he said, before you get clear on what it is, you're trying to break through this wall, which is like the industry. You're trying to become well-known. And so you're throwing all kinds of messages at it. Like what I sell, what I solve, what I do, I'm all of these things. And it's not getting anywhere until you get really pointed on the one problem you solve. That's when you start chipping away. And eventually you break through, and then this breaks through the wall, like the wall of being known and being seen and being recognized. So again, it's like, you've got to use like a really pointed effort to kind of break through. One of the other things that he said, you guys remember, people buy solutions to problems. You need to sell the problem as much as you sell the solution. That really sat with me because I am so avoidant of talking about the problem because I'm like, let's just be positive. We can talk about the solution, but for him to say you've got to sell the problem as much as you sell the solution was like a big aha.
Mhm.
And you guys have notes on anything else? I've got a bunch here from him, but.
One of the things that I see, and I personally don't do a ton on, should more. But he talked about when he's working with people and strategizing who they are in their brand is you have to build trust somehow with people. And that's to see you, to know you and learn from you. And so oftentimes we think, well, people don't want to know what I'm doing with my family or what I'm eating for dinner or all these things, but those are ways that people start to know you, if not person at the front end. So those things can help, not just always about what's the last house I sold. That doesn't help know you, that helps know what you do. They might be able to learn, people doesn't help. So always keeping that as a part of what we do is
Yeah.
the see, know, and learn.
One of the most actionable items I took from him was a 6-minute video on a question you were asked. Answer the question, give information, give education, and then do it in multiple different ways. So you're gonna actually take the text and put it as a static post with a photo of you. You're gonna have that full length video on YouTube. You're also gonna have it cut into shorts. You have so much content, you created one video, right? And so I was like, man, I can do that, right? I can do that once a week and I can have multiple posts across multiple platforms in a very consistent message.
I liked how he broke it down too. He said, think about the person you're serving, think about the problem you're solving. Now write down 52 questions they have. Think about the person you once were and the questions you had. Write down those questions, then take one question a week and answer it in a 6-minute video. So to me, this stuff becomes so much more easy to execute and apply when you've got a system rather than, oh, it's Monday, I gotta do this thing again. If you just tick off that list of questions there, and then you can start automating it around it, which is one, what do you say about automation? How to automate at scale. The future of marketing is about who has the most sophisticated system. So, thought that was good. He said, teach everything you know for free in small bite-sized chunks in random order.
Yeah.
And then you said people don't pay for information, they pay for organization and application.
That's right. And then it makes a ton of sense, right? Initially, you start putting stuff out, you're like, I don't want to give the whole farm away. But the reality is, I think we live in an age, different than 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
Access to information
It's out there.
it's there,
Yeah.
People don't come to Keller Williams, as an example, because MREA, that sits on the shelf of every other brokerage. They all have it there and they teach from that, but it's having the ability to take that and apply it and have a group of people around you that
That are actually applying it.
yeah,
What else, guys?
that's the bulk of what I have for him.
One other quote that he talked about, because he continually talked about solving problems and that type of thing. And he had said, when you're selling, there's wins and losses when you're selling, right? But when you're serving, there's only wins. So how we kind of look at how we serve people, no matter what the outcome is, we've won in some regard.
Good service. There is no fear when the mission to serve is clear.
Yeah.
The only time we have fear is when we're thinking about ourselves and not the people we're serving. It's like, wow. I heard that once, like when you're afraid to cold call or you're afraid to get out there and prospect, it's because you're thinking more about what you get than what you can give. So again, if I'm service oriented and I realize that I'm giving up something of value to people, I'm not asking for something from them, that starts to take away that fear. Okay. I'm just gonna throw this in there as the last thing. He said, I believe the calling on your heart is a result of a signal being sent out by someone who needs you. If you're feeling compelled or called to go out and serve, it's for a reason, and there's somebody who needs what you have to share and give. Okay, ready for the next one?
Yes.
How to
let's go.
say her name? Gabrielle? Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, I just took this from online. She's a board
Yeah.
certified family physician and distinguished New York Times bestselling author, lauded for her latest work, Forever Strong, a new science-based strategy for aging well. She was in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today's bestselling author. It's what she talked about, guys.
About health and food and fitness and, you know, that how to build a strong body. And, you know, be your best self and how that correlates to the mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's worth backing up. I mean, I've seen over the last few years, Gary has really, he's talked about like leadership is going on a journey and inviting people to come along with you in whatever facet you're doing. And so he's really shared a lot about his own health journey and his goal to live to 100 years old and like, what is he doing to get there? And how does that correlate to having a strong business? Like you can't have one without the other, or you can only grow in this one as much as you're willing to grow in that one. One of the things they also started when they opened with was, we've talked to some of the most successful realtors. They've had their best years ever, and they're the least healthy and least happy that we've ever seen. And he said that a year ago, and they remember last time we had the hustle and be happy thing, because they're realizing that we're teaching people how to hustle and win these big businesses, but at what cost? At the cost of health and happiness? That's not cool. So I think bringing her on was in part to say like, go after your business, get this, but like, don't forget about this. So I think I just wanted to back up and give a little bit of framework on it. She's well known for protein, but actually she was like, I'm going to correct you, Gary. My one word isn't protein, it's muscle. She said, we just need to
Right in front.
reframe, instead of people being focused on what they had to lose, being weight and fat, I want people focused on gaining muscle mass. You guys want to talk about any of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that she was really interesting. First of all, she kind of had an interesting cadence to her voice, which I kept honing in on. That has nothing to do with this, but I won't forget that moment of like, I'm just listening to how you speak. But she talked a lot about focusing on what you have to gain and not what you have to lose, for also the mindset, right? When you're thinking about what you have to lose, that's kind of a negative headspace versus what you're gaining. That puts you in a positive mindset, right? She kind of dug into that, as well as switching our thought process and losing fat and it being obesity problem versus a lean muscle mass, and how your body reacts to not having the proper amount of muscle on your skeletal.
It was interesting. She was like, muscle. I'm like looking at the fitness people in the room. I'm like, I'm kind of there, but not there. She said, muscle is like, I'm going to get the words wrong, and I'm not a PhD. Like if we get sick, God forbid, something serious happens and we get sick, our body will start to go to what's reserved in our muscle to keep us healthy longer. And then especially as we age, if we don't have much muscle mass, we don't have the reserves for our body to pull on and stay as strong as long. And so she talked a lot about, again, it's not just about being thin, and it's not just about not having fat. It's actually about building muscle, because that helps with all these other things. So
I would also say her food choices were interesting to me, because there was a lot of red meat. There was a lot of things that she said. I was like, this is an interesting perspective. As someone who has actually tried almost every diet known to man, I found it really interesting because it's almost counterproductive to what you've been told previously, right? And so it makes you just want to, right?
I'm kind of a health nut. I love the knowledge of health. I'm not a health nut by what I eat.
the application.
Let me be
I
clear.
know what I'm not doing.
But I love the knowledge. And I've said for a long time, like the real estate world and people's fitness journeys are extremely parallel when it comes to consistency. There's no way to cheat the system. Like you have to do the things on a daily basis, weekly basis, and like all of it is very parallel to business, right? And the biggest piece of what she kind of was getting at is muscle mass is amino acids, and your amino acids is what carries your body from illness, from disease, from all those kind of things. So if we don't have a strong foundation, our body takes longer to recover from anything, whether it's a simple cold, whether it's cancer, whatever it is. And it's also actually significantly linked with longevity, not in the sense of living to 100, but having a good life till 100. It removes a lot of the issues with brain health.
Talked a lot about
Parkinson's, Alzheimer's are very well linked around muscle mass, and how long they live is one thing, but how well they're living and the diseases that they live with is a complete other. And the biggest correlation to reducing those risks was muscle mass. And a lot of people think that means I have to eat a ton of protein. That's a part of it. But it's also about how you,
Talked a lot
Right,
about
right.
resistance training too. Like if you're not, she said 2 solid full body days a week, I'd be okay with. 3, I'd be really happy with, but you guys should be lifting heavy weights.
That's what I'm saying.
Me too, I was like, yeah.
The part that, the correlation I drew is, that I go down into rabbit holes on this kind of stuff too. But the simplest thing that we do is when we're trying to solve a problem for ourselves or our health or any of that stuff, we think about all the things that we have to do. So, okay, so I want to get healthy, right? So here's all the things I need to eat less of this and I need to eat more of that. And I need to work out like this and I need to do it at this time of day. And how am I going to fit it in? And what's and that's where it becomes super difficult to sustain and maintain the consistency over time, which what she said, and typically what I try to do and focus on is like, hey, if you can just focus on one simple thing, which is your protein intake, that tends to, from a dietary standpoint, take care of the rest of the things, right? If I know, hey, I need to get like X grams of protein in on a daily basis, and that's what I'm going to start with. The rest of the stuff, most of the stuff tends to fall into line.
On that line of like, I gotta do all these things, Gary interviewed her at the end. He was trying to pull some nuggets out of her and he was like, so I don't feel motivated, Gabby. Like, what do I do if I don't feel motivated? And she was like, well, you get up and do it anyways. He's like, but I don't want to. I don't have the discipline. He kept trying to like pull this out of her. And eventually he's like, all right, forget it. I'm just gonna give it to you. And he said, when you don't feel motivated and you don't have discipline, hire a coach. That's planning for your weakness. The #1 life hack for people who have more of what they want in any area of life is that they get a coach. And you think about that for every area of life. And I think that's huge until it becomes habit and then becomes a little part of who you are. Get a coach.
Yeah.
Have an accountability buddy because that builds into your weakness.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Anything else on her?
Let's keep cruising.
Hey, Cody Sanchez. How many of you have heard of Cody Sanchez? Ooh, she was a fire.
I think we'd be friends, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, I feel like I need to.
If you haven't, you should definitely look her up on Instagram. She's, how old is she? 20? It's like
I think she's in her
31
30s.
maybe. And I don't know if she's a billionaire. She's just like, just a fun little personality. Anyways, she's the founder and CEO of Contrarian Thinking, a digital media company, and Contrarian Thinking Capital, which is a small business holding company that's focused on bringing Main Street businesses back to the limelight. She used to work on Wall Street and like saw what was happening on Wall Street, left there and was like, oh, I'm going to focus on buying small businesses because there's a whole generation of people that are now aging out of wanting to run their businesses. But all of these small businesses, so she buys businesses like we help people buy houses. And so there's the setup.
Yeah, she buys the most boring businesses. Her first business was a laundromat.
Yeah.
She bought a laundromat. And as she started to speak on it, I was like, that is genius. Like, she owns the real estate in the laundromat. And it's really interesting how she decided to make this switch. She's passionate about helping take the big corporations out of small America and giving small business back. Now, I think she's probably, when you looked at her portfolio, I was like, okay, you are actually now also big business.
Yeah.
But why she started was to help small businesses be a part of the American dream.
Yeah.
I found that.
Yeah, she was talking about how she got started into it and then just a shift mindset. We're looking at her and being like, okay, so I'm gonna buy a business. Like, where do I start? Said the first place is just, hey, look at your checking account. See, where have you been spending money? What are the small business that you spend?
Who do you
Yeah,
send
that-
Venmo dollars to? That's a small
That's,
business.
yeah, who
Yeah.
you send Venmo dollars to, so on, and, there's a conversation to be had there. I think we're, like, without the knowledge, most of us are just like, oh, I do that.
I'd rather not look at who I'm sending Venmos to.
I was like, useful business.
She kind of broke it down real estate wise. She actually showed like, there's the real estate agent and then there's all of these vendors off of the real estate agent that get paid in a transaction. What if you owned some of those companies? Right? And it was just like a mind blow to me, like
Painting company, a
Painting
handyman
company.
company, or whatever.
moving company, right? Like there's all of these businesses around that you're paying dollars to. She actually says she doesn't actually spend $1 on, if any of her businesses need anything. She doesn't spend $1 until she asks herself, should I buy that business? That's a crazy place to think, but if you really get there, that's amazing because you're paying yourself back and also providing more jobs for the people you care about.
I'm gonna back up a little bit. After she talked, Gary came out and he said, I was backstage and I had people asking me, do you really want to teach these realtors how to buy businesses instead of like selling more real estate? And he was like, yes, I do. I want the realtors to have other incomes or other streams of wealth and other opportunities. And so I think that was that's important for you guys. This isn't just like what principles can I apply to real estate? He wants to arm you guys with an opportunity to understand how to build wealth in a bigger way, which I think was valuable.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. She actually said they did a Zoom prep call with Gary and Jay Paps, and she's like, you know what I talk about, right? Are you sure you want me to come and talk about this?
So the premise of it is she'll look at a business, she'll look at the profit and loss statement and see, are they profitable? And then there's a mathematical formula that she has like at a website online that you can figure out like, how much is it valued at right now? And my
3 to 5
understanding
times,
is 3 to 5 times the net profit, yeah. So my understanding is she goes in, a lot of what she does is help them figure out how to increase their prices on whatever the service or the product is that they're selling, then how to scale and maximize systems, which I've said this since I was team leader and then moving into this position. The thing that being in real estate and being behind the scenes has taught me is how to build a business. It's not how to sell houses. If you guys are running the systems, you could go into any business and go, oh, how are they generating leads? How are they building relationships with the leads? How are they giving a class act like transaction, hospitable experience to the client? What does a profit and loss statement look like? So if you can learn how to run real estate as a business, to me, I was like, this isn't my thing right now, but I could do this because I've done this. I don't think we see it that way. And that's our goal. Part of our goal here is to teach you guys to be business owners and not house slingers. They're like very different things.
And I think it's applicable, like, I think there's so much synergy, as I look at it, I have a good friend that bought a piano moving business 5 years ago now. And we have conversations all the time, and it's like, duh, if I would have went in a partnership with you, like, A, we're providing leads to each other relatively consistently. So now we can make money off that, but B, he's doing the same thing I'm doing, just with pianos as opposed to real estate or recruits or whatever that is. So it's not that difficult. It's a matter of having leverage. You guys are already.
So here's a few more bullet points that I had. It's easier to buy profits than it is to earn it.
Yeah.
Oh,
What you said about the Dior or Christian Dior brand. She's like,
Do you think
she posted, she's like, this is the owner of Christian Dior. And
like an
this-
old white
this-
guy, right? Like,
Yeah, just a super, she's like, do you think he's the one who had the artistic vision? Do you think he's the one who's designing all this stuff? You know, she said, no, he bought the MF. That's
Not
what
that
she-
MFers and
Yeah,
everyone's like,
exactly.
"Ugh."
That was just funny.
Yeah. You can she said you can use other people's money to buy companies. I mean, it's the same thing we talk about buying real estate investment properties, and Kami's built her business way, like, Gary always says it, if you find the transaction, the money will show up. You have a lot of people in your world that have money to invest, but they're looking for a good deal to invest in. So you don't have to have the cash. She also was talking about how sellers can finance the deal. A lot of these owners of companies are very proud, they're family-owned businesses, and maybe their son or daughter, I think she said, their son or daughter doesn't want to take over their business, they want to be a TikTok superstar. So she's like, so now they want to hand it off to someone they like, know, and trust. So they're willing to finance the deal often because they like you as a human to buy their business. This is like my price and your terms, or my terms and your price. Like, how do we negotiate it? These are basic things, but I was like, oh, yeah. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Wait, risk comes from risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. It's not risky unless you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, she said to make sure that whatever you're investing in, whatever business you're trying to buy, you understand it. Like, make it simple for yourself. She says the one that she lost was like automated ships, but she lost money on that. Like, she loses money on things that she didn't understand, so she probably shouldn't have been investing in.
And she said it a lot of times. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, that's just a really cool point too, is that I think so many times about like finance, oh, everyone has to be successful. She's so good at this, and she still has failure, and she talks about it, and she probably learned more from those that have failed about, gosh, I'm not gonna buy again, don't know what I'm doing, than being really.
She developed
all
her
the time.
rules,
Yeah,
right? Those
right.
failures are how you learn what
That's so
to
cool.
do, right? So failures are, they're good things. That's winning is high fives and handshakes. Failures are where the learning happens, right?
Remember at the end when Gary then came out and interviewed her? And he had said he couldn't take notes because she was just,
Stream of consciousness. is
Yeah.
what he said, yes.
and, but do you remember when he started asking her, do you know, she said she lived in Austin. And he said, do you know this company? Do you know that? And she's like, yeah, I've heard of that. And he's like, I own it. And remember when Gary went through all the lists of things of companies that, and I didn't know he owned that many companies. Then he went to something that was a bigger chain and she's like, you own that? And he's like, no, but I own the land underneath it. And I'm like, oh my God, that was so cool.
And I think he was making a parallel to us as real estate agents
Yes.
in ways that we can easily get involved.
Yes.
Commercial real estate, own the real estate that the business is in, have a vested interest in that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool.
Little, I mean, things like he owns car washes. He owns
Yes.
just little, like, one thing, with Tony Robbins that came later, and everyone's focused on Tony Robbins and his presentation, but something that could easily have been glossed over. He posted up a list of companies that he had, right? That he owned. There was like 100 or so, companies that were in there. And people think of Tony Robbins getting paid for his speaking engagements and his income coming from that. That's a very, very small percentage of his earnings, but he owns little pieces of all these 100 companies. It's not owning a company, and that means I'm gonna run this business, right? I'm gonna invest in it, apply some principles in there, and somebody else is gonna run it, and I'm gonna go and move on. And just creating mailbox money. So he doesn't have majority share of a lot of these companies. It's just a small of it and having a bunch of them. That's kind of the idea.
And that's the same thing with Gary too.
But in my opinion, I'm like, I get that, but if real estate agents don't own their own investment properties, like, that's a place to start before you own a company, right? Like,
I don't think it was either, or I think it was an and, like.
yeah, like, I mean, that seems overwhelming for people maybe in the, like, here being like, own a company, right? I'm like, own what you know first and then branch out from there.
But I also think a part of that, like my friend who bought the piano business, I'm blanking on the actual connection, but how many of you in here know somebody who gets underpaid for their work because that's what they charge as a vendor? I mean, I have like 6 people I can name right now that they don't charge near enough for the service they provide, and I keep going back to them because they do great service and they're undercharging. That's a business, for example, that there's the handyman they use. Like, I could potentially say, hey, here's $100,000. I'm gonna help run your business. You're gonna keep doing exactly what you're gonna do, but I'm gonna run it for you, and you're just gonna go service it. Like, it doesn't have to be big, but I think it can be things that we're using already, but see an opportunity to help systematize or build profit out of those businesses. So don't get I agree with you. Don't get overwhelmed by the business term, because really owning investment property is owning a business, and owning your real estate business is a business. All those things are
Small
They're small.
businesses. Yeah, we already are all already own them.
Yeah. Contrarianthinking.co is her website. And then I wrote down Biz Buy Sell. Was that the one where you can put a valuation? Is that, you guys remember what that website was? Biz Buy Sell. Yeah, oh, that's where it's like,
Yeah.
there you go. It's where you can find a business to buy if you want. I agree with King's point, what you guys were just saying. I think this stuff can be really overwhelming, and I think that this is a part of the crazy benefit that we have to be in this company is to be exposed to stuff that's causing my mind to expand and go, well, this might not be for me now, but maybe 5 years from now I can buy it, or maybe 3 years from now I can buy it. But like, we want to expose you guys to this, even if it's not for now, or maybe not ever, but just to realize like there's a lot of opportunity that maybe we're not seeing or thinking about. She said every business she goes into, she thinks, is this one I want to buy? And again, you don't have to have the cash on hand to do it. There are ways to do it without having the money in your pocket to buy it.
Yeah, and I
Which is
think as an agent, there's so many vendors and services that we use, thinking about it that way of like, is this, do I want to partner or do I want to own, right? Like this business is an interesting way to look at your business as you grow and the money that you're already spending, right?
Yeah. Every time well, this time especially coming back from family reunion, watching some of those panels, I realize like I'm not thinking big enough. Every time, like there's a lot of things that are just outside of the realm of what we're thinking, because we get up every day here as real estate agents, we're like, hey, how can I sell real estate? And then you realize you start getting exposed to different conversations from people who have sold a ton of real estate for long periods of time and still do, but they will tell you that that's not wealth. That's chasing being rich, right? And the difference being, you sell like all the people that are all over the place in this industry, all over your social media, all over billboards and so on. Those people are chasing the same thing. And the difference between that and wealth is about cash flow, recurring cash flow, and being rich is about what can you earn in a year. But as soon as you stop putting your time in and exchanging your time for that money, the rich stops. Hopefully you've saved enough, right? And you can do things. It's not to say that that's bad, but there's a whole other wealth conversation that's being had by these people. And guess what? They sell a lot of real estate and they do all this other stuff. I think that's where it's, whoa, okay.
Well said. Okay, we got 2 more. They had on Vance Walker, an 18-year-old American Ninja Warrior.
Oh, yeah.
So he was diagnosed at 18 months old with a form of cerebral palsy called spastic diplegia in his legs. That required him to wear leg braces, and his legs, even while he was on stage, were just like constantly twitching. And so they had him on, and his mom.
His mom was fierce.
And just like, I'm like, oh, she was like, he's not going out there without me. She was talking half the time, but pretty passionate about, I think it's interesting that they brought him up for pretty obvious reasons, in my opinion, but you guys want to share what you
Yeah.
took from it?
I think one of the things that I thought was really, like, they told her that her son would never walk, like that he would never, and she was like, yeah, no, that's not an option. What do we need to do? And so she just literally every step of this child's life, which again, she was going up on stage with him. He's 18, so who knows? But she was like, she didn't take no for an answer. She was like, yeah, that's not okay, right? And then as he started to grow and he would do all these sports, but like there was always a reason he was in football and he couldn't keep the stamina for football, right? Like he wasn't, and there was something else he wasn't fast enough or whatever. And so he loved doing sports, but couldn't do them because of different things. And then he found what he loved, which was Ninja Warrior, and he started doing it at 9. Is that when he started the gym?
Something like that, because I think 12 was when he would have won like an adult round,
But
but
he
he wasn't
won- he
old
wasn't
enough to like
allowed
do the
to.
obstacle or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, it was really, his mom basically advocated for him the whole, and just like, you will not be told no. If you want to do it, let's do it. Let's figure it out. It'll be different for you. And I think that's just such a lesson for all of us, because we hear no, and we don't say, no, it's not an answer, right? Like, we just go, oh, you said no sometimes. So just that passion of like, yeah, no, I will make this happen.
And I think about, the journey of cultivating what works for you. That was the tie to the real estate, because think everyone says, well, you just got a lead gen and that'll solve all your problems. I agree. What does lead gen mean for you? What does that look like for your business? What are the things that you're good at? Because the real estate agent is some of the stuff that you're not good at. I just said it earlier, right? Social media, I don't do it enough, whatever. And you hear that all the time with agents. Like, hey, we're in accountability group 2 weeks ago, and one agent kept like missing the social media stuff that he kept saying. I was like, why don't you just set yourself free? Like, that's just not your thing. You know, what do you actually have success with? Open houses. Okay, do that, you know, and take the pressure off from all these things that, you know, either you can't do, you don't want to do, they don't light you up, they don't make you feel good, and just go 7 levels deep on this thing, and that can totally work for you, no matter what it is. I mean, we have examples all over Keller Williams of people having success doing the thing that you might think doesn't work, right? What was it last at Mega Camp or something? They brought up somebody who just did mailers, and they did it and tracked
The
it. and
golden
whatever.
letters.
Yeah. You know, and
Golden letters to luxury lift
yeah,
specifically.
and that's all they did.
I think that's good. I think one of the other parallels for me was that he consistently made life for himself harder so that he could perform better when it counted. So like when he was really little, his mom would have to help him do these exercises with his legs, and the doctor had put a certain amount of tension on the braces he had to wear. Well, when she got home, she took out tools and made the tension tighter so that it was harder for him to walk. So she made everything more difficult. Then he would set up an obstacle in his backyard, and he would make the obstacles harder than what everybody else was practicing on because he knew he needed it to be more difficult. And I think it seems so basic, but are we practicing the skills that it requires for us to win in this industry? And why not make it harder on ourselves than it actually is when we show up in real life, so that we're just more polished and sharp? Like, it's what athletes do. It's what people do. So that was a big takeaway for me, is like, are we practicing? Are we making it difficult enough? And no, it's no wonder that we get to a listing table and we're like scared because we've never tried it. Like, he didn't show up to the obstacle course never having tried it. He had done it way more difficult ways than what it actually was when he showed up. So.
Makes me think of our script practicing in the morning. For those of you who don't know, like us, all the TLs we get on a call every morning during the week, or 4 days out of the week, and we role play, you know, our phone calls and so on. And initially, when I first started doing it, I'm like, this is not how it goes. Like, nobody beats me up this bad, you know. But eventually, you know, you start to roll through and we have fun, and it's actually right. Like, it doesn't happen. Like, calling actual people, they don't beat you up that bad. But, you know, having Kami or John or Carmen or whatever, like, hey, we're feeling a little spicy this morning. I'm just gonna hammer you. No matter what you say, I'm gonna keep hammering you. And if we can roll with that.
Which is every morning for me.
Zach,
Right.
imagine you're doing that.
But the idea is if you can roll through that, you know, while your peers are watching you, that's harder than being actually in the game, right?
Okay, anything else on Vance?
You won $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
I want $1 million.
At the end, they showed he was one of 4 people
Yep.
ever. Like,
Yeah.
he won all of these competitions, and then you have to climb how many stories? It was like a rope. But how high was it? You can Google it. Anyways, if he got to the top within so many seconds, he'd win $1 million. And they showed him at the end as an 18-year-old, and he got to the top and won $1 million. And we're like, yeah. I was crying. It's great.
He didn't use his legs at all, too. I
didn't.
found that interesting.
No,
He
this is
literally
all of
all
his
of it.
body.
His legs are just like hanging, like. Wow.
It was cool.
It was cool.
It was pretty inspiring. Okay. Bill Jones. He is the author of a few books, but the primary one is Exactly What to Say. I didn't take a lot of notes on him, so I'm leaning on you guys for this one. All right, let's hear it, Holly. What you got?
So Phil Jones showed up at, was it Mega Camp? Yeah, he showed up at Mega Camp. That was my first exposure to him. I had heard from him, but he has a book. It's called, like you said, Exactly What to Say, and it's a super quick read. I recommend it to everybody. But the premise behind it is he's talking about how you can change your words to change your outcomes. And it sounds super simple, and quite frankly, it actually is very simple. But he's tying in the words that you're choosing to coincide with human psychology and human behavior and pack mentality. So how you can, it's not manipulate, because ultimately we have good intentions and we want our clients to win, but how do we get them to take their walls down, right? And that's ultimately what we want. We want an at-bat so we can show them the value of working with us and what we can bring to the table. But first they gotta trust you and, and take the walls down. So he talks about language and how you can do that.
Prior to the specific words, though, he has that triangle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Do you remember what the size of the triangle?
Yes, I've got it.
Curiosity is one of the things, like, how do you approach any conversation? We talk about this stuff, you guys, we talk about this stuff all the time. And we're in a class right now as leaders that we say it's common sense, but is it common practice? Well, I know I should be curious, but I'm like, you know that's common sense. You show up to a listing appointment, you should be curious. But are you curious?
Or are you making assumptions?
Are you making assumptions? Are you selling yourself? Are you telling them what you're doing? Are you showing up trying to actually understand what's happening with them, what their actual needs are? So curiosity is one of the sides of the triangle. Do you have it?
Empathy or relatability, and then courage for action.
Courage? Okay. And empathy is like is a huge one. I talked to somebody recently, a big business guy, and he said empathy should be the basis of all of our businesses. But what's the difference between empathy and curiosity? Or how are they different?
I think curiosity is when we go in asking questions versus telling, and we get to know the person on the other side. There was he actually did a couple breakout sessions, and I went to one of them and he was talking about how to win more listings. This is a guy who's never sold.
He crushed it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, you might want to get into real estate.
Yeah, but he was talking about questions to ask, versus going in and telling people. And typically a listing presentations, agents come in their bag and they go and show me around the house. And here's my listing presentation. Here's all the things that I'm gonna do, right? And you're not asking really a ton of questions to get them to that point of, okay, now we're looking towards the future. So he was very specific about taking them through the past to the present and then to the future with questions. And that gets them in the mindset then to actually talk about what moving forward looks like. And he actually even argued that most people don't want to sell their house. It's just circumstances kind of make them feel like they should. So oftentimes when you're coming over there, they might be sitting there thinking like, well, let me see if he can convince me because I don't really want to do this. Maybe why should I not?
Right. The purpose of those questions and the curiosity is to gain that certainty from the client themselves of, yes, I do want to do this, and now I understand why, or all these questions are making me not want to do this. So it removes the questions that can later come up of their motivation to do one thing or the other. Curiosity helps create the certainty.
And the last one at the bottom was
Courage.
courage, and the courage is the courage to give them action, right? Like, how do we just naturally move them to the next step?
He also just talked about like the courage to ask the questions, like, how many of you in here have been married? Like, people raise their hands. It's like, how many of you, how did he put it? He was like, who asked, did you ask a question? Or did you just get married? Somebody at some point asked the question, like, will you marry me? And so he used that to just say, at some point you gotta ask the question. Like, you have to close. And I think we run into that, when people are like, he used examples of like, okay, well, you leave a listing appointment. It's really great meeting you today. And you just let me know if you have anything, questions that you have come up, rather than at the end of the appointment saying, well, does it make sense for us to work together? Great. Sign here. Like, you've got to close. So we talked about how to ask the question to get to the close too, which I think was really great. Seems basic, but yeah. Anything else on Phil? I mean, we have 10 minutes and yeah. Or do you guys have questions, thoughts on any of this? Do you have any golden nuggets on Phil? Ollie, feel free to share, and then I'm gonna go back to Gary's deal.
a little, just a few ideas for you guys to jot down as far as like listing presentations and that breakout. He talked about, he gave specific questions to ask. And when you started, like typically, when you show up at the door, they're expecting to be sold. So how do we disarm them, and how do we come from curiosity and just start asking questions and kind of get them into the flow of things? Said that, you know, the first thing was talking about asking questions around how long have you been here? Like, how long have you been in this house? Versus just coming in and complimenting that, like, hey, you have a beautiful home. Like every other realtor comes in and says, hey, you have a beautiful home. You know, come in and talk about how long have you been here? Talk about what made you choose this neighborhood. Why did you choose to live in this
Rapport
neighborhood?
building,
Yeah.
too, obviously.
Yeah. He asked, how has the home served you, right, in the 7 years or whatever, how long it's been that you've been here? And that's talking about the past, right? So you have them now in a past state and they're going through all the things. The next step is you bring them to the present. And in the present is, okay, what's changed, right? And that's very important to get them to, okay, you talked about all the things, the reason we came here and so on. Now let's talk about what's changed, you know, and you have, based on what they say, you have a couple follow-up questions to kind of dig deeper into what has changed. And then the following thing to get them into the future. All right. What might you want to do next? Is what he asked. So very simple question. So now you're bringing them into the future and what that might look like for them. And you've moved forward and you moved them from past, present to now future. Now they're thinking about that. And then at that point is when you can start to, you know, talk about how we get them to that future versus starting, you know, bringing your listing presentation out of the gates. He was very firm about keep your listing presentation put away until you bring them through that whole cycle of questions and you get them to that future state. Now we can actually start walking down that path together. And he had some other things as far as closing and so on, but I'm gonna leave that out.
Well, I'm just, if you guys haven't seen this, or if you have, here's your refresh on here. I'm super visual. And I think when I go into appointments or when we're coaching anybody, this is a cycle or a framework. It's what Ollie's saying. I'm just giving you the visual to it. This is a framework you can use to take anybody through a cycle of change, basically. And in the sales world, it's used in sales. So you start with the present. So, actually, you start with, tell me about your home. It's so beautiful. How long have you lived here? Like, what's going really well? What do you love about it? People want to talk about that first. Oh, you're at another brokerage? Tell me about it. What's that experience like? I mean, we bring people through, I'm coaching somebody on life transformation. I'm asking where they're at now, okay? So you're thinking about a change. Tell me what's causing you to think about that. You can have these bullet point questions that bring you into, this is gonna take them to the negative. Well, I'm thinking about making a change because I'm having a job change, or I had a baby, or I'm getting divorced. This is where they tell you why they're thinking about it, but they don't really want to sell the house. There's some situation. So you're bringing them through. I'm just going to show you this visual. And what Ollie is talking about. Okay, so what if you decide not to sell your house, but you still have these circumstances happening? Then what does that look like 6 months down the road? So this is the present side and this is the future side. You're bringing them to the negative future. Well, gosh, I lost my job, and if I don't sell my house, I'm probably gonna foreclose, you know, or like, I don't know, I got whatever. They're gonna talk about what happens if nothing changes. Here's the negative future results if nothing changes. All right, let's say you do decide to make a change. Let's dream for a second. What could this look like? Then you bring them here into the future, the positive future. And you get them dreaming as vividly as possible about what the future looks like in a positive way. So you've taken them mentally through this cycle to where they've moved through in their own discovery this process without you telling them why they should sell their house. This visual has been super helpful for me. And then I always forget how to set it up. Presence on the left, futures on the right, positive on the top, negative on the bottom. Okay?
Any questions on that? It's a super useful tool.
Yeah, when you're in any input with buyers, same deal. What happens if nothing does change? I know you're thinking about buying, but let's just say we're a year from now and you haven't purchased. What does that look like for you? Some of them might discover that it's not the right decision. Look, this is not meant to manipulate, it's meant to lead. Just.
Yep.
Are we doing on time?
Back to.
All right, I'm gonna give you Gary's thoughts. He showed up to the CEO summit and he said, I was writing this morning and I had some thoughts. He just like whipped out these really poignant sort of statements that he titled Life Force Thoughts. I want to write these down. They're good. Said master a few things, life is big. Try to master everything, life is small. I'll say that again. Master a few things, life is big. Try to master everything, life is small. Second one was follow a hard plan, life is easy. Follow an easy plan, life is hard. What does he mean by that? You guys remember talking about that? Follow a hard plan, life is easy. Follow an easy plan, life is hard.
The more dialed in you are on your plan, the more steps there are to the plan, the more specific you are about the plan and the activities, better the outcome. The more loose you are about that, worse the outcome.
Kind of talked about also showing up when you don't want to. There are
Like
days,
discipline, that's
yeah,
what
there are
makes it
days
hard.
you don't want to do something, right? But if you do it anyway, life will be, that can, is where the magic is, right? And it's when you allow yourself to negotiate with yourself that, yeah, that's easier, but life will be harder because you didn't do the work on the front end.
It also really reminds me of that Jake said in this room when you guys were doing the 10 learning in January about, happy people, they challenge themselves. They're always putting goals out there, so they're like choosing the challenge. People that don't choose the challenge, that want to live that easy life, challenged and sometimes like difficulty is forced on them. They're not picking it, it's just forced on them. They didn't challenge it.
Right. Yeah, you're gonna experience the hard no matter what.
Yes, so pick your.
Pick your hard. That's right.
Good.
Hopefully.
Third one he had was focus on what matters and you'll have few regrets. Focus on what doesn't matter, you'll be full of regret. Focus on what matters, you'll have few regrets. Focus on what doesn't matter, you'll be full of regret. It's so simple. But like how many of us focus on what doesn't matter? Like squirrel in it, yeah, right? Doesn't matter. This is such a dumb, I'm gonna just like totally out myself, you guys, you can judge me if you want. I was watching The Bachelor, have any of you watched?
Judging.
Yeah, okay.
Brutal judging right now.
Yeah, it's from Becker's, Minnesota. She is like the sweetest sweetheart.
the best.
So Liddy, you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong. She was diagnosed with what? Lyme's disease?
Yeah.
Lyme's, and it was like so bad. She had to fly to Germany. She had tubes coming out of her chest. She was like knocking on death's door. It was like awful. And she didn't know if she would ever get any better. Well, she was able to go, I think it was Germany, like she was able to go somewhere and get some like wild treatment for it. And then got better, but because of the disease had started to lose her hearing and got a cochlear implant. She's the cutest, sweetest, like little thing. And this last week she was saying, you know what? Like, it's so interesting because I wake up every day just feeling so grateful to feel healthy that if I don't end up with this boy, it's okay. And I just was like, damn it, yeah, like focus on what matters and you'll have few regrets, and focus on what doesn't matter and you'll be full of regrets. And she's like focusing on what matters, and she has perspective in a really wild way because she went through something that was ridiculous. Yeah, okay, I just outed myself. Like, you can watch it, okay? But yeah, so if we can easily focus on what isn't permanent, what doesn't matter, what will change, what will move on, but we spend our time there and we'll look back and go, God, this 5 years just cruised by and I spent it with my kids, or I didn't, but that's where regrets show up.
I was watching The Bachelor.
Oh, I'm not gonna regret it one bit.
Fired.
I want to say a lot of people really like that show, so
Mason, you don't count, okay? I'm
Right.
just gonna put you out on that one.
I'm a huge advocate of Daisy, so you go, Jen.
Better Google her later. She is
She
like.
really is.
Okay,
Oh, Jason.
the last one was lead a
could also-
full life and your life will be fulfilling. Lead a full life, your life will be fulfilling.
Is that a mic drop?
Yeah, that's my mic drop.
That's all talk. Good work.
I pride myself on ending on time.
Perfect.
All right, go team. Team on
Appreciate you
three.
guys.
One, two, three.
Yeah.